My name is Sarah Jenkins, but all my life, everyone has called me Sally. I am 68 years old, and I live in a modest little house on the outskirts of Lufkin, Texas. This story I am about to tell you is the most painful of my entire life, but it is also the one that taught me that it is never, ever too late to stop being a fool and start truly living. It is a story about hope, about blind faith, about a promise that was never kept, and about a truth that took 40 years to finally reach my ears. Today, as I brew my drip coffee on the gas stove I bought with my own savings, as I look out the window at the little garden I planted with my own 2 hands, I still have a hard time believing that I spent the better part of my life waiting for a man who never had any intention of coming back for me. A man who didn't die in any war, who wasn't taken prisoner in some foreign jungle, who didn't lose his memory in a bombing. A man who simply decided that I wasn't worth the effort, who decided to build a whole other life with another woman, with other children, while I sat here, like an idiot, mourning him while he was still alive for decades. But let's not start at the end, right? This story deserves to be told from the beginning, from those days when I was an innocent one, alls 2, 8-year-old girl who believed in fairy tales and promises whispered under the moonlight. Because to understand the sheer magnitude of the betrayal, to comprehend the heavy weight of all those lost years, you need to know the Sarah I was before I became the Sally I am now. Before I go on, I want to ask you for something very important. If you are enjoying this story, if something in it is touching your heart or sparking your curiosity, I sincerely ask that you subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. These stories are real. They are from women like me, like your mother, like your grandmother, and they deserve to be heard. It will only take you a second to click that subscribe button, but for this channel, it means the absolute world, because it helps these voices reach more people. I also ask that you drop a like on this video. That thumbs up helps so much, and leave a comment down below telling me what you think of this story so far. I would love to know what city or state you are watching from, whether it's Texas, New York, Florida, or wherever you might be listening from. Your comments and your support are what keep this space alive, where women of my generation can share our life experiences. Thank you in advance, and now, let's continue. I was born in 1945, right as World War II was ending, in a Lufkin that back then was barely more than a dusty logging and farming town in deep East Texas. My family was poor, the kind of folks who worked the land from sunup to sundown. My father, Matthew Jenkins, was a farmhand in the cotton fields, and my mother, Ruth, dedicated herself to taking in laundry from wealthy folks to scrape together a few extra pennies. We were 5 siblings. I was the third, with 2 older brothers, James and Michael, and 2 younger sisters, Linda and Rose. We lived in a drafty wooden shack with dirt floors that my father had built with his own hands, with a tin roof that made such a terrible racket on rainy nights that it wouldn't let us sleep. Life in my house wasn't easy, but I also can't say it was sad. We had what we needed to eat, even though a lot of times it was just pinto beans, cornbread, and collard greens. On Sundays, if we were lucky, my mom would make a chicken stew with the giblets the butcher gave her for free. I went to the local elementary school, which was about 1.5 miles from our house, walking barefoot most of the time because shoes had to be saved for special occasions. I remember that I loved school. I loved learning to read and write, but I was only able to finish up to the 3rd grade because my dad decided that was enough education for a girl. By the time I turned 12, I was already working full-time, helping my mom wash clothes. We would go out to the wash basins behind the house with heavy bundles of dirty laundry from the well-off families in town. And there we would spend hours scrubbing on the washboards, our hands freezing in the cold water, rubbing with heavy lye soap until the white button-down shirts were spotless. It was hard work that destroyed your hands and bent your back, but I didn't complain because I knew those few dimes we earned were necessary so my younger siblings could eat. The years passed like that, in a monotonous routine of work and more work. I dreamed, like all girls my age, of meeting a good man who would take me away from that life of endless labor, who would give me a house of my own, children, a better life. But in Lufkin, opportunities were scarce. The local boys either went off to the big cities up north to find work, or they stayed working the fields just like their fathers, without any bigger aspirations. I had already turned 17 and still hadn't met anyone who gave me those butterflies in my stomach that they talked about on the radio, soap operas we listened to at Miss Betty's house when we visited her on Sundays. It was in October 1962 when everything changed. There was a county fair in town to celebrate the fall harvest. The main square was decorated with colorful banners, there were food stands, traveling vendors, and at night there would be a dance with a live country band. My mom had given me permission to go with my younger sisters, as long as we were back before 10 at night. I put on my least patched dress, a light blue one that had belonged to my cousin and that she had handed down to me the year before. I braided my hair with a white ribbon and dabbed on a little bit of cheap perfume I had bought with my own savings at Mr. Benson's General Store. I remember we were standing near the funnel cake stand. Linda wanted me to buy her one when I saw him for the first time. Robert Bobby Miller, tall, dark-haired, with his hair slicked back with pomade, wearing blue jeans and a crisp white shirt that looked clean and well-ironed. He had deep brown eyes and a smile that lit up his whole face when he laughed. He was standing with a group of friends, talking and drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon from those glass bottles that cost practically nothing back then. Our eyes met for a second, and I felt something I had never felt before, a warm rush that traveled from my stomach all the way up to my cheeks. I quickly looked away, embarrassed, and kept walking with my sisters, but I could feel that he was still looking at me. When I dared to glance back, there he was, watching me with a smile. I gave him a shy little smile back and immediately looked away again, feeling my heart beating so hard I was sure everyone at the fairgrounds could hear it. Half an hour later, when we were walking around looking at the games, he walked right up to me. I remember his exact first words. "Good evening, miss. Forgive my boldness, but I couldn't let tonight pass without asking your name." His voice was smooth but confident, and he smelled of a sweet aftershave mixed with the scent of tobacco. "All nervous," I answered almost in a whisper. "My name is Sarah." He smiled even wider and said, "What a beautiful name. I'm Bobby. Would you allow me to invite you to dance later when the music starts?" My sisters just stood there, watching the whole scene with wide eyes. I knew my mom would kill me if she found out I had been talking to a boy I didn't know. But something in the way he looked at me, something in his smile made me say yes. "I'd like that," I told him, feeling my face turn as red as a tomato. He said his goodbyes with an, "I'll be waiting right here for you then." And he walked back to his friends, turning around twice to look at me and smile. When the music started, there he was, waiting for me at the edge of the makeshift dance floor they had set up in the center of the fairgrounds. He took me out to dance for 3 songs straight. The band was playing romantic country ballads I recognized from the radio. He danced close, with one hand on my waist and the other holding my hand, and I felt like I was floating. He asked me about my family, my life, my dreams. I told him I worked helping my mom, that I liked to read whenever I could borrow a book, that I dreamed of one day having a house of my own with a little garden to plant flowers. He told me he worked as a mechanic's helper at a garage in town, that he made $5 a day, and that he was saving up to open his own auto shop someday. That night, when he walked me to the corner of my street because I couldn't let anyone see me walking right up to the front door with him, he said, "Sally, can I call you Sally? Sarah sounds so formal." I told him yes, that my whole family called me that. Then he took my hand and said, "Sally, I liked you the minute I laid eyes on you. I'd really like to keep seeing you, if you'll let me, to get to know you better, to come call on you." My heart jumped with joy, and I told him yes, I'd like that too. The following months were the happiest of my life up to that point. Bobby visited me on Sunday afternoons with my dad's permission, and we would sit on the wooden chairs out on the front porch, always supervised by my mom or one of my sisters, just talking. He would bring me little gifts. A bag of peppermint drops, a new ribbon for my hair, a small cross necklace. He talked to me about his plans for the future, about how he wanted to get ahead, about how he wanted to give a good life to the woman he married. After 6 months of courting, in April 1963, Bobby asked my dad for my hand in marriage. I remember standing outside, a bundle of nerves, trying to listen to the conversation they were having inside. When my dad walked out and said, "It's settled, daughter. You have my blessing," I felt like I was going to explode with happiness. Bobby was barely 20 years old and I had just turned 18, but back then, that was a perfectly normal age to get married. We got married in August of that same year at the First Baptist Church. It was a simple, humble wedding, but to me, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. My mom made me a white dress out of cheap fabric she bought at the dry goods store, and my Aunt Connie lent me a veil that had belonged to my grandmother. Bobby looked incredibly handsome in a borrowed suit a cousin of his had given him. After the service, there was a reception in the yard of my parents' house. My mom and aunts fried up mountains of chicken, made potato salad, fresh biscuits, and pitchers of sweet tea. Somebody brought a guitar and played songs all afternoon. We shared our first dance as husband and wife to the tune of Can't Help Falling in Love, and I felt my happiness was so vast it couldn't even fit in my chest. We moved into a little room we rented at Mrs. Higgins' boarding house. She was a widow who owned a large plot of land and had built a few small rooms out back to rent out. The room was tiny. It barely fit a full-size bed, an old wardrobe my mother-in-law gave us, and a small table where we kept a hot plate for cooking. We shared a bathroom with 2 other tenants. We had next to nothing, but I was immensely happy. Every morning, I woke up early to pack Bobby's lunch before he headed to the garage, and during the day, I went to help my mom with the laundry to keep bringing in a little money. The evenings, when Bobby came home from work, we spent together talking, making plans for the future, dreaming of the day we could afford a house of our own. Those first months of marriage were beautiful. Bobby was affectionate, hardworking, and responsible. He gave me his entire paycheck, minus a tiny allowance he kept for his cigarettes and a Friday beer. With that money, I managed the groceries, paid the rent, and even managed to save a few pennies in a coffee tin I hid under the mattress. We dreamed of buying a piece of land to build on, even though we knew it would take years of saving. But in January 1964, something happened that would change our lives forever. Bobby came home one night with a look on his face I had never seen before. He was dead serious, worried, as if he were carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I sat on the bed and asked him what was wrong. He sat next to me, took my hands, and said something that made my blood run cold. "Sally, I have to tell you something really important. A letter came in the mail from the government. I've been drafted. There's a war going on in a place called Vietnam, way over in Asia. The U.S. is sending troops and they need more soldiers. 3 of my cousins have already been called up or enlisted. They say the pay is good, real good, especially with combat and hazard pay." I couldn't understand any of it. "War? What war? Why do you have to go?" I asked, feeling a lump form in my throat. He explained that a lot of boys were going, that it was a chance to make money we would never make here in Lufkin, that with what he could save we could buy not just an empty lot, but an already built house, that we could have a better life. "But Bobby, it's a war. You could get killed," I told him, tears welling in my eyes. He hugged me tight and said, "Nothing is going to happen to me, sweetheart. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be real careful and I'm going to come back for you. I promise. It's just for a little while, 2 years at the most. And when I get back, we're going to have enough money to start fresh, to have everything we dreamed of." I spent that entire night crying. I didn't want him to go. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about the house. I just wanted him to stay with me. But he had already made up his mind. He said it was for our future, that it was his duty as a man to provide, that he couldn't let this opportunity pass. In March 1965, 2 months after I turned 20, Bobby left. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I woke up early, cooked him his favorite breakfast, bacon, eggs, and hash browns, even though I could barely see the stove through my tears. He packed his small duffel bag with the few things he was taking: 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, underwear, and his paperwork. At 8 a.m., a Greyhound bus pulled into the town square to pick up several of the local boys who were also shipping out. We all gathered there to see them off. When the time came to say goodbye, I was an absolute wreck, crying an ocean of tears. He hugged me tight, so tight I could barely breathe, and whispered in my ear, "I love you, Sally. I love you with all my heart. I'm going to come back for you, I swear to God. You'll see, everything is going to turn out fine. Wait for me, my love. No matter how much time passes, I will come back for you." I gave him one last kiss. I tasted the salt of my own tears mixing with that kiss, and I watched him climb onto the bus. He leaned out the window, smiling to try to calm me down, waving his hand goodbye. The bus pulled away, and I just stood there, watching him leave with my heart shattered into pieces, but clinging to his promise. Clinging to those words, "I will come back for you." I didn't know I couldn't possibly have known in that moment that those words were the biggest lie of my entire life. That promise would become a chain that would keep me bound for 40 years to a ghost, to a memory, to a man who never had any intention of keeping his oath. The first few months after Bobby left were the hardest of my life up to that point. I moved back into my parents' house because I couldn't afford the rent at the boarding house on my own. I went back to working full-time with my mom, scrubbing other people's laundry by hand, my knuckles destroyed by the soap and the cold water, but now with a heart destroyed by his absence, too. Bobby had left me a little bit of cash, about $30 we had managed to save, and promised he would send more as soon as he started getting his army paychecks. For the first 2 months, I heard absolutely nothing from him. Nothing. Not a letter, not a message, nothing. I was desperate, losing sleep, praying every single night, begging God that he was okay, that nothing bad had happened to him. Finally, toward the end of May, the first letter arrived. I still have it, yellowed and wrinkled from being read so many times. It was brought by a boy from town who was passing back through from the military base where Bobby was doing his basic training. In the letter, Bobby told me he was okay, that boot camp was tough but he was strong, that they would be shipping him to Vietnam soon, that he missed me terribly and thought about me every single day. At the bottom, he wrote, "I love you, my beautiful Sally. Wait for me. I'll be coming back for you sooner than you think." I must have read that letter 1,000 times. I memorized it. I kept it under my pillow, and every night before going to sleep, I took it out and read it again, tracing the words with my fingers as if I could touch Bobby himself. It was my most prized possession, my connection to him, proof that he hadn't forgotten me. 6 more months passed without news. By then, it was December 1965, and I was sick with worry. I asked everyone in town if they knew anything about the boys who had gone to the war, but nobody knew a thing. Rumors were flying around town that several had already been killed in combat, but nobody could confirm anything. In January 1966, the second letter arrived. This time it came through the regular mail, with strange stamps and a postmark from a place called Saigon. The letter was shorter than the first. Bobby told me he was in Vietnam now, that the heat was unbearable, that the war was awful, but that he was okay, and to keep waiting for him. He included a money order for $15, the first money he had sent. I cried with relief, just knowing he was alive, and I cried with happiness over the money, which was a small fortune for us back then. I used that money incredibly carefully. I gave a portion to my dad to help with the household expenses, and the rest I hid in my coffee tin of savings. I kept working with my mom because I didn't want to spend that money unless it was absolutely necessary. It was the money from Bobby's sacrifice, money he was earning, risking his life far away, and I was going to guard it like gold. A year passed like that. Every now and then, a letter would arrive, sometimes with money, sometimes without. The letters got shorter and shorter, more distant. They didn't say romantic things like the first ones. He just told me briefly that he was fine, that he had to change positions, that the war was getting harder, but to keep waiting for him. They always ended the same way. "I love you. I will come back." By 1967, I was 22 years old. A lot of my friends were already married with kids. My sister Linda had just married a boy from the next county over. My mom told me Bobby had been gone for 2 years, that maybe he wasn't ever coming back, that I was still young and pretty and could rebuild my life with another man. But I flat out refused. I was a married woman. I had made vows before God, and Bobby had promised me he was coming back. People in town started talking. They said I was a fool for waiting, that Bobby surely had another woman over there by now, that he probably even had kids with some Vietnamese girl. They said I was wasting my best years waiting for a ghost. But I covered my ears to those comments. I had faith. Faith in my husband, faith in his promise, faith in God to protect him and bring him back to me. The letters kept arriving sporadically. Sometimes 3 months would go by without a word, and I lived in constant agony thinking he'd been killed. Then a brief letter would arrive saying he was okay, and I would breathe a sigh of relief. The money also came now and then. It wasn't a lot, but it was something. By the end of 1968, I had saved up about $500 in that coffee tin, a very considerable amount of money. In 1969, 4 years after Bobby left, news started rolling in that the Vietnam War was winding down, that the U.S. was starting to withdraw troops. I felt a massive wave of excitement. He's coming back soon, I thought. I'm going to see him, hug him, kiss him so soon. We're finally going to be able to start our lives together for real. But 1,969 passed. 1,970 arrived, and Bobby didn't come back. The letters became even more sporadic. Sometimes 6 months would go by with no news. When a letter did arrive, it only said very vague things. That he was having paperwork issues, that he'd been transferred to a different unit, that he would sort everything out soon and come home. By 1971, I was 26 years old. My mom was sick with heart problems, and I spent all my time taking care of her while still working. My dad was getting older and couldn't work the fields like he used to. My brothers helped when they could, but the heavy burden of the household fell on me. I used some of the money I had saved from what Bobby sent to buy my mom's medicine. In July 1971, my mom passed away. It was a crushing blow for all of us. I cared for her right up until the very last moment. I held her hand as she slowly faded away. With her last words, she told me, "My daughter, don't waste your life waiting. If Bobby really loved you, he would have come back by now. Find yourself a good man. Rebuild your life. Have children while you still can." I told her no, that I was going to wait for Bobby as long as it took, that he was going to return because he had promised me. After my mom died, the house felt emptier than ever. My sisters were married and living in their own homes. My brothers had moved out of state for work. It was just my dad and me left. He faded away slowly. Without my mom, he just lost the will to live. He died 2 years later, in 1973, of a broken heart more than anything else. When my dad died, I was 28 years old and completely alone. My brothers sold my parents' house, and we split the money evenly. With my share, plus what I had saved from Bobby's letters, I bought a small piece of land on the outskirts of town. It was just a bare patch of dirt, but it was mine. There, with my brother's help, I put up a cinder block structure with a tin roof. It wasn't much, but it was my home. I dedicated myself to working, taking in laundry, baking pies to sell, doing whatever it took to survive. I wasn't getting money from Bobby anymore. The last letter containing cash had arrived in 1970. After that, only 2 or 3 more letters came, very brief, with no money, just telling me to keep waiting. The very last letter I received from Bobby arrived in December 1975, 10 years after he left. By then, I was 30 years old. The letter read, "Sally, I know it's been a long time. Forgive me for not coming back yet. There have been complications, but don't worry, I'm going to fix everything soon. Wait for me just a little longer. Don't forget me. I love you." That was it. He didn't even put a date on it, didn't even leave a return address. After that letter, I never heard from him again. The years passed. 1,976. 1,977, 1,978, 1,979, 1,980. A decade turned into 2 decades. I kept waiting. I kept mourning while alive. I wore dark colors. I didn't fix myself up. I rejected the invitations from local men who occasionally showed interest in me. "I'm a married woman," I would tell them. "My husband is away on duty. He's coming back soon." Eventually, people stopped saying anything to me. They just looked at me with pity. "Poor Sally," they would say. "The one who waited for the man who never came back. The one who became a living widow. The one who threw away her youth, her life, waiting on a ghost." My brothers told me to have him declared legally dead, to file the paperwork to be officially considered a widow, to move on with my life. But I couldn't. I couldn't accept that he was dead. Something inside me, something stubborn and foolish, told me he was alive, that someday he would return, that someday he would knock on my door and it would all have been worth it. The 80s went by, the 90s arrived. By the year 2000, I was 55 years old. 35 years had passed since Bobby left more than half my life. I was an older woman now, with gray in my hair, wrinkles on my face, and my hands deformed from decades of hard labor. I was still washing clothes, selling baked goods, surviving day by day in my humble little house, but I was still waiting. I still kept those letters in a shoebox. I still kept his photograph, the only one I had of him, framed on my nightstand. And every night before bed, I still prayed for him, asking God to keep him safe and bring him back. In 2003, my brother James, who lived out in California, came to visit me. I hadn't seen him in years. When he looked at me, his eyes welled up with tears. "Sister," he said, "you've let yourself die inside, waiting for that man. You have to let go of the past. You have to live whatever life you have left." I told him the same thing I always did, that Bobby was coming back, that he had promised me. But then my brother said something that surprised me. He told me he could help me look up information on Bobby. That now, with the internet, that new computer thing, you could search for people, that maybe we could finally find out if he was alive or dead, or where he was. At first, I told him no. I was scared. What if I found out he was dead? But he insisted. "Sally, it's been almost 40 years. You have a right to know the truth." I told him okay. To search, to find whatever there was to find. James went back to California and promised he would look into it. Months went by. I went on with my normal life, but with a constant knot of nerves in my stomach. What was my brother going to find? Was Bobby dead? Was he alive? And if he was alive, why had he never come back? In August 2005, exactly 40 years after Bobby left, my brother James called me on the phone. His voice sounded strange, like he didn't quite know how to say what he needed to say. "Sally," he said, "I found information on Bobby. I need you to come to California. I have to tell you this in person." I felt my soul drop to the floor. "He's dead, isn't he?" I asked, my voice cracking. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then my brother said something I never, ever expected to hear. "No, sister, he's not dead. He's alive. And there's more. Much more. But I need you to come here so I can show you everything, with proof, so you can see it for yourself." I couldn't believe it. Bobby was alive. After 40 years, he was alive, a part of me filled with an immense, overwhelming joy. He was alive. He hadn't died in the war. But another part of me filled with a fury I didn't know I could feel. He was alive. And in 40 years, he had never come back for me. He had never come looking for me. What had happened? If this story has you glued to your screen, if you want to know what I discovered about Bobby, I ask you to drop a like on this video right now. I know we're only halfway through, but I need to know you are there, that you are listening. Comment down below what you think so far, what you think I found out. I promise you, what comes next is something you would never expect. 2 weeks later, in September 2005, I was on an airplane for the first time in my life, flying to Los Angeles, California. My brother James had sent me the money for the ticket. During the entire flight, I couldn't eat or sleep. My head was a whirlwind of thoughts. Bobby was alive. That was the only thing I knew. But what else did James know? Why did he sound so serious? Why wouldn't he tell me everything over the phone? When I landed in California, James picked me up at the airport. He hugged me tight, and I noticed his eyes were red, like he had been crying. "Sister," he said, "what I am going to show you is going to hurt a lot, but you have to see it. You have to know the truth." We went to his house, where he lived with his wife and 3 kids. His wife, Martha, welcomed me with so much love. She made me some chamomile tea and told me to sit down on the couch. James turned on his computer and said, "Sally, I found Bobby. He lives in San Diego. It's only 2 hours away from here." I felt like my heart was going to leap out of my chest. "He lives close by? Can we go see him?" I asked, trembling with emotion. My brother looked at me with a profound sadness and said, "Sister, there is something else you need to know before you decide if you want to see him or not." He pulled up a Facebook page on the screen. I didn't know what that was. He explained it was like a photo album on the internet where people posted about their lives. "This is his profile," he said, pointing at the screen. And there he was, Robert Miller. The picture was of an older man, bald, heavy-set, wearing glasses, but I recognized him instantly. They were the same eyes, the same smile. It was him, my Bobby. After 40 years, I was looking at his face again. But then my brother started scrolling through the photos Bobby had posted publicly, and my entire world crumbled. There were photos of him with a blonde American woman, smiling together. There were photos of a wedding, of a big, beautiful house, of kids, graduations, birthdays, Christmas mornings, a whole life, a complete family. "I don't understand," I said, my voice shaking. "Who is that woman? Why does he have pictures with her?" My brother swallowed hard and said, "Sally, that's his wife. Her name is Patricia. They've been married for 37 years. They got married in 1968, just 3 years after he left Texas. The world stopped spinning. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. 37 years married to another woman? But how? We were married. He had promised me he was coming back." My brother continued, his voice soft but firm. "There's more, sister. They have 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls. They're all grown and married now. Bobby has 8 grandchildren. He showed me pictures of all of them. A large, happy, smiling family. Photos at Disneyland, at the beach, at family reunions. An entire life he had built while I was waiting for him in Lufkin. But he sent me letters," I stammered, tears beginning to stream down my face. "He told me he was coming back. He sent me money. How can he be married to someone else if he's married to me?" James hugged me as I began to sob uncontrollably. "Sister, there's more. I have to show you everything. You have to see the whole truth." He showed me the other things he had found. Public military records showing that Bobby had indeed served in Vietnam, but that he had been discharged and returned to the United States in 1967, barely 2 years after leaving Texas. Not 10 years, not 20 years, 2 years. By 1967, he was already back. He had just decided to stay in California. He met Patricia in 1968 at a manufacturing plant where they both worked. They got married that same year. They had their first child in 1969. All while I was waiting in Texas, while I was receiving his letters telling me he would return soon, while I was saving every dollar he sent, dreaming of our life together. "The letters," I said suddenly. "The letters he sent me after 1967. He was already here. He was already with her. And he kept writing to me, telling me to wait." James nodded slowly. "Yes, sister, the dates line up. When he sent you that last letter in 1975 telling you to keep waiting, he had already been married to Patricia for 7 years. He already had 2 kids with her." I couldn't process it. I couldn't believe that the man I had loved, the man I had waited for 40 years, the man to whom I had dedicated my entire existence, had lied to me in such a cruel, calculated way. He hadn't died. He hadn't been trapped in the war. He hadn't gotten amnesia. He hadn't had issues with his paperwork. He simply decided to stay in California, build a brand new life with a brand new woman, and leave me waiting like a fool in Texas. Why? Was the only thing I could ask between my sobs. Why did he do this to me? Why didn't he just tell me the truth? Why did he leave me waiting all those years? My brother didn't have the answers. He just held me while I cried out 40 years of pain, 40 years of deceit, 40 years of a lost life. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I lay in the guest bed at my brother's house, staring at the ceiling, the images of those photos swirling in my head. Bobby smiling with his wife, Bobby holding his kids, Bobby in his big house, the entire life he got to have while I scrubbed other people's clothes on a washboard, while I lived in a cinder block room, while I refused to rebuild my life because I was being faithful to my husband. The next day, my brother asked if I wanted to go confront him. "He lives just 2 hours away, Sally. We can go. You can look him in the eye and ask him why he did what he did." I was torn. A part of me wanted to see him. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted him to see what his lies had done to me. Another part of me didn't want to give him the satisfaction. I didn't want him to see how thoroughly he had destroyed me. But then I thought about the 40 years. 40 years of my life that I had wasted waiting for him. 40 years where I could have been happy. I could have had children. I could have had a family. I could have actually lived. And I decided yes, I had to see him. I had to say to his face exactly what he had done. 3 days later, my brother and I drove down to San Diego. We had Bobby's address thanks to the internet. It was a beautiful house in a middle-class suburb with a manicured front lawn and a brand new SUV parked in the driveway. Nothing like the little shack I lived in back home. My brother rang the doorbell. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it was going to burst. I heard footsteps inside. The door opened, and there he was. Bobby, 40 years older, heavy, bald, wearing glasses. But it was him. My eyes recognized him instantly, even though my mind still couldn't comprehend that he was standing there, less than 3 feet away. He looked at me without recognizing me at first. Then his eyes went wide, his face turned ghost white, and he whispered, "Sally." Yes, Bobby, I said, with a voice I tried to keep steady, even though my entire body was shaking. It's me. Sarah. Your wife. The one you left waiting for 40 years while you built a whole life with someone else. He froze completely. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Behind him, a blonde woman appeared, the woman from the photos. Patricia. Honey, who is this? She asked. Bobby didn't answer. He just stared at me as if he were looking at a ghost. Bobby, I insisted, I need you to tell me why. Why did you lie to me? Why did you leave me waiting? Why did you send me letters telling me you were coming back when you were already here, married to her, having kids? Tears started streaming down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away. I wanted him to see them. I wanted him to see the agony he had caused me. He finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Sally, I didn't know how to tell you. I just didn't know how. Patricia stepped forward, completely confused. What is going on? Who are you? Hold on a second, I said, looking right at Patricia, my voice rising. You didn't know about me, did you? He never told you he had a wife back in Texas. She shook her head, her face turning from confusion to pure shock, and then to rage. My brother stepped forward and handed her copies of our marriage certificate to prove everything I was saying. She looked at the paper, and then she started screaming at Bobby, cursing at him, demanding to know how he could do this. Bobby put his hands up, trying to calm her down, trying to explain. But I wasn't going to stay quiet. 40 years, Bobby! I yelled, my voice ringing out over hers. I lost 40 years of my life waiting for you. I refused to marry other men because I was your wife. I didn't have children because I was waiting to have them with you when you came back. I lived in poverty, working like a mule, saving every single penny, waiting for the day you would return. And you were here, in this beautiful house, with your American wife, with your kids, living a happy life, while I died a little bit every single day waiting for you. He lowered his head, unable to look me in the eye. I'm sorry, he mumbled. I'm so sorry, Sally. When I got back stateside, everything changed. The war changed me. I wasn't the same anymore. I met Patricia and I thought I could start over. I thought with time you'd forget about me, that you'd move on and rebuild your life. You thought? I screamed. How was I going to forget you if you kept sending me letters telling me to wait, if you kept sending me money, if you promised me over and over again that you were coming back? You kept me chained up with your lies, Bobby. You stole my life with your goddamn lies. Patricia yelled one final thing at him, turned around, and slammed the front door behind her, leaving Bobby standing alone on the porch with us. He looked destroyed, but I didn't feel a single ounce of pity for him. I want you to know something, I said, wiping my tears. I didn't come here just to ask for explanations. I came to tell you that you robbed me of 40 years of my life, but you are not going to steal one more day from me. You are going to sign divorce papers. You are going to give me what I am owed for all these years, and after that, I never want to see or hear from you ever again. He nodded weakly. Yes, Sally, whatever you want. I'm sorry. I really am so sorry. But his apologies meant nothing to me. They were 40 years too late. I turned around and walked back to my brother's car, feeling an enormous weight lift off my shoulders, but at the same time, feeling a massive, hollow void in my chest. During the drive back to my brother's house, I didn't speak. I just stared out the window, processing everything. 40 years, half of my life, gone. There was no way to get them back. There was no way to live those years over again. They had vanished into thin air, sacrificed on the altar of a lie. That night, in my brother's guest room, I cried like I had never cried in my entire life. I cried for the 20-year-old Sally, who stayed behind waiting. I cried for the children I never had. I cried for the love I never knew. I cried for the life I never got to live. I cried for every single one of those 40 lost years. But through those tears, something started to shift inside me. A rage, a deep, burning, righteous anger. Bobby had taken 40 years from me, but I still had life left to live. I still had time. And I was going to make sure he paid for what he did to me, not with violent revenge, not with destructive hatred, but with justice, the justice I deserved. That night, between tears and anger, I started to plan. I started to think. Bobby thought that with an I'm sorry and signing some divorce papers, everything would be settled. He was dead wrong. I was going to make sure he paid. That his wife knew everything, that his kids knew everything, that his perfect life was shaken up just as badly as he had shaken mine. It wasn't going to be a cruel vengeance. I wasn't going to destroy him, but I was going to make sure he faced the consequences of his actions. And more importantly, I was going to make sure I recovered something of what he owed me. Money, recognition, something tangible that would compensate even just a fraction for what he took from me. Because Sarah Jenkins was no longer going to be the foolish woman who waited for 40 years. She was going to be the woman who stood up, who faced the truth, who demanded justice, and who rebuilt her life from the ashes of a lie. I was 60 years old, yes, but I still had time. I could still live, and by God, I was going to live. The following days in California were intense. My brother James helped me hire a lawyer, a Mr. Barnes, who specialized in cases of bigamy and matrimonial fraud. When I told him my story, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he said, "Miss Jenkins, your case is one of the most heartbreaking I've ever heard, but it's also one where the law is completely on your side." He explained that Bobby had committed bigamy, which is a serious crime in the United States. He explained that our marriage in Texas was still perfectly legally valid because it had never been dissolved, which meant that his marriage to Patricia was technically null and void because he was already legally married to me. He told me I was entitled not just to a divorce, but to heavy financial compensation for all those years of deceit. "We can sue for emotional distress, for retroactive spousal support, and for financial compensation," Mr. Barnes explained. "We have the documentary proof, the letters he sent you, the money orders, your original marriage certificate. He can't deny a single thing, and if he has property, savings, a pension, you are entitled to a share of it." I listened to all of this feeling a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Satisfaction because there was finally going to be justice. Sorrow because no amount of money could ever give me back my youth, my lost years, or the family I never had. But it was something. At least he wasn't going to walk away completely free of consequences. Mr. Barnes sent a legal summons to Bobby. He also contacted Patricia because she needed to know the full legal truth. A week later, we had a meeting in the lawyer's office. Bobby and Patricia were there, each with their own attorney. I was there with Mr. Barnes and my brother James. The tension in that room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Patricia looked at me with a mix of sympathy and absolute horror. Her life had been a lie, too. She hadn't known her marriage wasn't even legal, that her husband of 37 years had been technically married to another woman the entire time. Bobby's lawyer tried to argue that it was a cultural misunderstanding, that Bobby thought that by moving states and starting over, his first marriage was somehow dissolved. But Mr. Barnes dismantled that in seconds. "Your client sent letters to my client for 10 years, Mr. Barnes said. Letters where he promised to return, where he explicitly told her to keep waiting for him. That is not a misunderstanding. That is deliberate, sustained fraud." Patricia started to cry. She turned to Bobby, her voice trembling. "You lied to me for 37 years. How could you do this to me? How could you do this to her?" Bobby didn't answer. He just stared at the floor, totally defeated. The meeting lasted 3 hours. In the end, we reached a settlement. Bobby would sign the divorce papers. He would pay me $100,000 in compensation for damages and retroactive support. He would give me $1,000 immediately to cover my short-term living and legal expenses. He had to comply within 30 days, or he would face criminal charges for bigamy and fraud. $100,000. It was more money than I had ever seen in my entire life. It wasn't enough to compensate for 40 years, but it was something. It was tangible proof that he owed me, that he had robbed me, and that he had to pay. After the meeting, Patricia walked over to me with tears in her eyes. "I am so sorry for what happened," she said. "I didn't know anything. If I had known, I never would have married him. You didn't deserve what he did to you. I believed him too." She was also a victim of Bobby's lies, just in a different way. Before leaving that office, I stood right in front of Bobby. I looked him in the eye for what I knew would be the last time in my life. "Bobby Miller," I said, "you took 40 years of my life with your lies. You kept me chained up with false hope while you lived happily with another family. But I want you to know something. Despite everything you did to me, despite all the pain, despite all the lost years, I am going to be fine. I am going to use this money you're giving me to finally live the life I deserved all along. And you? You are going to have to live with the weight of what you did for the rest of your days." He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "Sally, I am so sorry. If I could turn back time." I cut him off. "You can't. Time doesn't go backward, but you can do the right thing now. Sign the papers, pay what you owe, and never, ever try to contact me again." 2 weeks later, the $1,000 was deposited into a bank account my brother helped me open. The divorce papers were signed and finalized. After 60 years of life, 40 of them spent waiting in a web of deceit, I was finally free. Legally divorced. Free of Robert Miller forever. With that settlement finalized, I had to make decisions. The $100,000 would be paid out with an initial lump sum of $15,000, and the rest arriving in monthly installments over the next year, according to the agreement. But that initial cash was mine, right here, right now. What was I going to do with it? I stayed in California for another month with my brother, thinking and planning. One night, James and his wife Martha took me out to dinner at a nice restaurant. While we were eating, Martha said something that made me reflect. "Sally, you're 60 years old. You still have time to live, to see places, to do things you've always wanted to do. Don't let the years you have left look like the ones that have already passed." She was right. I was 60. If I was lucky, I could live another 20, maybe even 30 years. I wasn't going to waste them. I wasn't going to keep living like a defeated woman, like a victim, like someone whose life had been stolen. I was going to take whatever life I had left and live it to the absolute fullest. I started making plans, real, concrete plans. First, I was going to fix up my property in Lufkin. I wasn't going to live in a cinder block room with a tin roof anymore. I was going to build a real house, small but dignified, with solid floors, a shingled roof, a fully equipped kitchen, and my own indoor bathroom. Second, I was going to stop breaking my back taking in laundry. I was going to find a better, easier way to make a living, maybe open a small business. Third, and this is what excited me the most, I was going to travel. I was going to see places I had only ever seen on television. I was going to experience things I had denied myself my whole life. My brother James offered to let me stay and live with him in California. "The quality of life is better here, better doctors, everything is easier," he told me. But I knew I didn't want to stay. Texas was my home. Lufkin, as poor and dusty as it was my land. That's where my parents were buried, where my childhood memories were. I wasn't going to run away from my roots. I was going to go back, but I was going to go back a different woman. I was going to go back as a woman who had faced her most painful truth and survived. Before flying back to Texas, I did something I had never done in my life. My brother and his family took me sightseeing around California. We went to Disneyland. Yes, me, Sarah Jenkins, a 60-year-old woman, went to Disneyland. I felt silly at first, surrounded by kids and young families, but then I just let go. I rode the rides, took pictures with the characters, ate cotton candy, and for the first time in 40 years, I laughed out loud. A free, booming laugh. Without the weight of the past, without the burden of waiting. We went to the beach. I had never seen the ocean. When we got there and I saw that endless expanse of blue water, I was speechless. I took off my shoes and walked on the sand, feeling the freezing waves wash over my feet. I sat on the shore and I cried. But they weren't tears of pain anymore. They were tears of liberation, of pure awe, of gratitude for being there, for being alive, for still having time to feel these things. We went to a national park, to Las Vegas, to San Francisco. Every new place I saw felt like a little piece of my life that I was taking back. Every new experience was a drop of medicine on the deep wound Bobby had left in my soul. In November 2005, I flew back to Lufkin. I brought with me the $15,000 upfront lump sum. It was a fortune. I also carried my signed divorce papers and the legal agreement guaranteeing the monthly payments for the rest of the money. When I got back to town, people were shocked to see me. I looked different. I had put on a little weight because I'd been eating so well in California. I was wearing new clothes my sister-in-law had helped me buy. I had my hair cut and styled at a real salon. But more than that, I had something in my eyes, in the way I walked, that I didn't have before. I carried determination. I carried strength, I carried the conviction of someone who had stared her worst nightmare right in the face and survived. My sister Linda was the first to come visit me. "Sister," she said, "you look completely different. What happened in California? Did you find Bobby?" I sat her down and told her everything, the whole truth. She cried with me, she got furious with me, and at the end, she hugged me tight and said, "It's about damn time that bastard paid. And it's about time you started living, Sally." The first few months back home were full of hard work. I hired a local contractor, Mr. Farnsworth, to help me expand and rebuild my house. He and his crew worked for 3 months. They knocked down the old cinder block walls and built a sturdy, beautiful little house. 1 bedroom, a living and dining room, a kitchen equipped with a gas stove, wooden cabinets, a nice table, and a full bathroom with a real shower. They put in tile floors, a shingled roof, nice aluminum windows. We painted everything in bright, cheerful colors. When they finished, I couldn't believe that house was mine. It was modest, yes, but to me, it was a mansion. It was dignified. It was a real home, not a shack where a life could barely fit. I bought new furniture. A small but comfortable living room set, a new full-sized bed with an orthopedic mattress, a dining table with 4 chairs. I bought a television, a refrigerator, a washing machine, things I had dreamed of having my entire life. With the settlement money that kept arriving monthly, I was also able to do something else I had always wanted. I opened a small business. With the help of my nephew Tommy, who knew a bit about retail, I opened a little corner store right in the front part of my property. Nothing huge, just a little general store where I sold the basics: sodas, crackers, candy, soap, cleaning supplies. It was a modest income, but it was steady. And the best part was that I wasn't breaking my back anymore. I could run the store sitting down without destroying my hands or bending my spine. But the most important thing I did with that money was invest in myself. I signed up for adult education classes at the local community center. Even though I knew the basics of reading and writing from my few years of grade school, I wanted to improve. I wanted to be able to read real books, write properly, understand the world better. 3 times a week I went to those classes, and for the first time in 40 years, I was learning something new. I also started taking care of my health. I went to a doctor for the first time in decades. They ran a full set of tests. It turned out I had diabetes and high blood pressure, things I didn't even know because I had never had a checkup. They gave me medication and taught me how to manage it. I started eating better, taking half-hour walks every morning. My body, which I had neglected my whole life, just working myself to the bone, was finally getting the care it deserved. But what I enjoyed the absolute most was traveling. With the money I had safely tucked away, I allowed myself a little luxury every few months, a short trip. I went to Austin and stayed for 2 days in a clean, budget-friendly hotel. I visited the state capitol, walked around downtown, ate in nice restaurants. I went to San Antonio with my sister Linda. We saw the Alamo, walked the Riverwalk, went shopping. I took a bus tour with a group of ladies from town up to Washington, D.C. We saw the monuments, the Smithsonian museums, the White House. Every trip was an adventure. Every new place was proof that yes, I could live, that there was still a whole world out there for me to see, that there were still experiences waiting to be enjoyed. People in town started seeing me differently. I was no longer poor Sally who got left behind. Now I was Miss Sally, the lady with the nice house and the corner store. Miss Sally, who travels and sees the world. But it wasn't all easy. There were nights, many nights, where I woke up crying, where the heavy reality of those 40 lost years crushed my chest like a boulder, where I wondered what my life would have been like if Bobby hadn't deceived me. Would I have had kids, grandkids? Would I have found true love with someone else? On those dark nights, I would sit in my new living room, turn on my new television, make myself a cup of herbal tea, and force myself to think about the good things I had now. I had a dignified home. I had food on my table. I had savings in the bank. I had my health. I had my freedom. And most importantly, I had my dignity. A dignity I had won back by facing the truth, by demanding justice, by refusing to stay quiet and submissive. One day, about 1.5 years after I returned from California, I was working in the store when Mr. Abernathy came in. He was a widower in town who occasionally stopped by to buy cigarettes. He was an older man, about 65, who had worked as a teacher at the local elementary school before retiring. He had always been very polite and respectful to me. That day, after buying his cigarettes, he just stood there, like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the courage. "Can I help you with anything else, Mr. Abernathy?" I asked. He cleared his throat and said, "Miss Sally, excuse my boldness, but they're showing a movie over at the community center this Sunday. They're playing one of those classics, Casablanca. I was wondering if you might like to accompany me." I froze. A man was asking me out on a date. After 40 years of essentially not existing to any man because I was waiting for my husband, my immediate, knee-jerk reaction was to say no, like I always had, but then I stopped myself. I wasn't married anymore. I wasn't waiting for anyone anymore. I was free. "Mr. Abernathy," I said with a smile, "I would love to accompany you. What time is the movie?" His face lit up like a little boy's. "It starts at 5, Miss Sally. I'll come pick you up around 4:30. I nodded, feeling a strange fluttering in my stomach. Nerves, excitement, fear, all mixed together. On Sunday, Mr. Abernathy arrived right on time. I had put on a nice dress I bought on one of my trips, fixed my hair, and even put on a little perfume. We walked to the community center together, making small talk about the weather, the town, the local news. We watched the movie, and I laughed and cried with the story like I hadn't done in years. Afterward, Mr. Abernathy bought us ice cream cones over at Mr. Gary's shop. We sat on a bench in the square eating our ice cream, talking some more. He told me about his late wife, who had passed away from cancer 5 years prior. He told me about his 3 kids who lived in other cities. He asked about my life, and I told him the abbreviated version of my history with Bobby. He listened closely, and when I finished, he said, "Miss Sally, you are a very brave woman. What you did facing the truth and rebuilding your life, that takes a tremendous amount of courage." Nothing else happened that day. It was just an innocent outing between 2 older people. But to me, it meant the world. It meant that I could still feel something, that I could still enjoy someone's company, that there was still life left to live. Mr. Abernathy and I continued seeing each other casually. Once a month or so, we would go somewhere to the movies, out for a cup of coffee, to the county fair when it rolled into town. It wasn't serious, it wasn't a romance, just a friendship between 2 people who had lived through a lot and appreciated the quiet company of the other. And that was perfectly fine with me. I wasn't looking for a grand, passionate love in my 60s. I was just living, enjoying myself, doing the things I had always denied myself. The next few years passed peacefully. Bobby's settlement money kept arriving right on time every month until the entire $100,000 was paid off. With that money, I kept fixing up my house little by little. I put a nice fence out front. I planted a little garden with flowers and herbs. I bought a few more pieces of furniture. I also started putting money away for my old age, for the day when I wouldn't be able to run the store anymore. Something that brought me an incredible amount of joy was that, with the money and free time I now had, I was able to help my family in ways I never could before. When my nephew Tommy needed money to finish up community college, I was able to help him out. When my sister Linda got sick and needed expensive medicine, I bought it for her. When my brother Michael got laid off, I loaned him enough so he wouldn't lose his house. Being able to help my family, being able to be useful, filled me with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in decades. I also got more involved in the community. I joined a group of senior ladies who met at the community center to do crafts, chat, and support each other. I met other women there who had also lived through difficult things, widows, women who had been abandoned or went through bitter divorces. Sharing our stories, listening to one another, it was incredibly healing. I realized I wasn't alone. That many women of my generation had suffered betrayals and abandonment in one form or another. One day, one of the ladies in the group, Miss Shirley, suggested I write my story down. "Sally, your story is important. There are so many women out there waiting for men who are never coming back, wasting their lives on empty promises. Your story could help them open their eyes." At first, I was embarrassed. Who would want to read my sad little story? But then I thought, maybe she was right. Maybe my story could serve a purpose. Maybe it could help someone. With the help of a young teacher who taught classes at the center, I started writing it down. It took me months, writing bit by bit, remembering, processing. When I finished, I had a notebook full of my life, from the day I met Bobby at the fair to the day I confronted him in California. The teacher helped get the story published in a local Texas newspaper. They didn't pay me anything for it, but I didn't care. What mattered was that my truth was out there, my experience, for whoever needed to read it. And sure enough, I received several letters from women who had read the piece. Some shared similar stories. Others told me my story had finally given them the push they needed to stop waiting for someone who clearly wasn't coming back. Knowing my pain had served a good purpose was incredibly healing. By 2010, 5 years after discovering the truth, I was a completely different person. I was no longer broken, defeated Sarah, waiting by the window. I was Miss Sally, the lady who owned the store, the lady who traveled, the lady who had faced her past and won. I still had hard days. I still missed the years I lost. It still hurt to think about the kids I never got to have. But I had learned to live with that pain. I learned not to let it define me. One afternoon in December 2010, I was watering the flowers in my garden when I saw an unfamiliar car pull up. It parked in front of my house, and a young woman in her 30s stepped out. She was pretty, with features that looked vaguely familiar to me. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Sarah Jenkins," she said. "That's me," I said. My curiosity instantly piqued. "How can I help you?" She took a step closer, her voice trembling. "My name is Melissa Miller." I'm Bobby Miller's daughter." My heart skipped a beat. One of Bobby's daughters. What was she doing here? "I found your story on the internet," Melissa continued. "Someone scanned it from the newspaper and posted it. I read it, and I needed to meet you. I needed to apologize on behalf of my family for what my father did to you." I didn't know what to say. I invited her inside, made her a cup of coffee. We sat in my living room, and she told me her side of things. It turned out that after I confronted Bobby, the truth had blown his family apart. Patricia divorced him shortly after finding out the extent of his lies. His children, all adults by then, were absolutely devastated to learn their father had deceived not just their mother, but another woman for decades. Bobby had ended up living alone in a small apartment, barely having any contact with his kids. "My father did something unforgivable," Melissa said, tears in her eyes. "And I know an apology doesn't fix anything. It doesn't give you your years back. But I needed you to know that what he did doesn't represent how he raised us. We are not like that. And I wanted to offer you this." She pulled an envelope out of her purse. Inside was a check for $20,000. "It's from me and my brothers and sisters. It's not to make up for anything, because nothing could ever make up for what he did to you. It's just a gesture, something to show you how deeply we regret what happened." I looked at the check. Then I looked at this young woman who bore absolutely zero blame for the sins of her father, who had traveled all the way from California to Texas just to apologize on his behalf. And in that moment, I understood something. Resentment didn't serve me anymore. Hate didn't serve me anymore. Bobby had already lost everything. His marriage to Patricia, his relationship with his kids, his dignity. I, on the other hand, had won my freedom, my dignity, my life. "Melissa," I said softly, "you do not have to apologize for your father. You didn't do anything wrong. As for the money, I appreciate it. But I don't need it. Your father already paid what he owed me legally. This," I gestured around my house, toward the store out front, toward my life. "This is more than I ever thought I would have. I'm okay. I am at peace." Melissa insisted, telling me it was important to her and her siblings, that they would feel better knowing they had done something. Ultimately, I accepted the check, not because I needed the money, but because I understood that she needed to feel she had done something to make amends. We talked the entire afternoon. She told me about her life, her family, how the revelation had affected them all. And I told her more about my life now, about how I had managed to rebuild myself. Before leaving, Melissa asked me, Did you ever forgive my father?" I thought for a long time before answering. "Forgiveness is a complicated word," I finally said. "I haven't forgotten what he did. I can't say that what he did was okay. But I don't carry hate in my heart anymore. I'm not holding on to resentment. I let that go because it was poisoning me. So, I suppose yes, I forgave him. Not for his sake, but for mine. So I could live in peace." Melissa left that day with tears in her eyes, thanking me for receiving her, for listening to her. I sat there in my living room with a $20,000 check in my hands, thinking about how strange life could be. With that money, I decided to do something I had always dreamed of. A huge trip. the trip of a lifetime. In 2011, at 66 years old, I flew out over the Pacific to Hawaii. I saw the crystal clear water, the volcanoes, the beaches. It was magical. I felt like a little girl discovering the world. 2 years later, in 2013, I dared to do something even bigger. I went to Europe with a tour group. I crossed the ocean. I saw Paris, Rome, Venice. I saw the Eiffel Tower, the Colosseum, the canals. Every place I visited was another piece of my life I was taking back, another piece of the years I had been robbed of. Now, as I sit here telling you this story, I am 68 years old. It has been more than 50 years since I met Bobby, over 40 since he left, and 13 since I discovered the truth. My life isn't perfect. I still live in a small, modest house in Lufkin. I still run my little corner store to make an income. I am still an older woman in a small town, with no children, no immediate family of my own. But you know what? I am happy. As happy as I can possibly be, considering everything that happened. I have a dignified home. I have my little garden where I love spending my afternoons tending to my flowers. I have my store that supports me. I have savings for my retirement. I have enough health to enjoy my life. I have friends at the community center. I have Mr. Abernathy, who after all these years is still a wonderful friend who I go out with now and then. And most importantly, I have peace. Peace with myself. Peace with my past. Peace with my present. I found out that Bobby died. Melissa sent me a message to let me know. He was 77 years old when he passed away from a massive heart attack. I didn't go to his funeral. I felt no need to. That man hadn't been a part of my life for a very long time. I said a prayer for his soul. Because at the end of the day, it's up to God to decide what to do with him, and I went on with my life. Sometimes, when I am alone at night, I still think about those 40 years I lost. I think about the 20-year-old Sally who stayed behind waiting. I think about the kids I never had, the grandkids I will never meet. I think about what my life would have been like if things had been different, and yes, it hurts. It will always hurt. There is no way it couldn't. But I also think about the Sally who faced the most agonizing truth and did not break. About the Sally who demanded justice and got it. About the Sally who, at 60 years old, decided it wasn't too late to live. And that Sally, the Miss Sally I am today, is someone I am incredibly proud of. My story doesn't have a fairy tale ending. I didn't marry Prince Charming. I didn't live happily ever after in the traditional sense. But I found happiness anyway. I found peace. I found dignity. And I found the strength to live the years I have left on my own terms. Free from lies, free from false hope, free from broken promises. If there is anything I want you to take away from my story, it is this. It is never too late. It is never too late to face the truth, no matter how much it hurts. It is never too late to demand justice. It is never too late to rebuild your life. It is never too late to let go of whatever is destroying you. It is never too late to live. I started truly living at 60. 60 years old, when most folks think everything is already winding down. And you know what? They have been the absolute best years of my life, because they are my years, lived on my terms, with my freedom and my dignity intact. To all the women out there listening to this, especially the women of my generation who might be trapped in similar situations waiting for someone who isn't coming back, clinging to promises that are never going to be kept, I tell you, let go. Let go right now. Life is too short to waste it waiting. Life is too valuable to live it chained to a lie. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how many years you have already lost. What matters is what you do with the years you have left. You have a right to live. You have a right to be happy. You have a right to not settle for whatever crumbs people throw at you. You have a right to demand respect, dignity, and honesty. And if nobody else is going to tell you, I will. You are worth it. You are worth everything. You deserve all the good things this life has to offer. Don't settle. Don't resign yourself. Don't sit around waiting. Stand up, face the truth, seek justice, and live. Live with everything you have, with everything you are. I lost 40 years, but I found peace, I found dignity, and I found happiness. And if I can do it, anyone can. Believe me, it is never, ever too late to start truly living. If you made it this far, if you listened to my whole story, thank you so, so much. Thank you for giving me your time, for listening to the life experience of this old lady from Lufkin, Texas. If my story moved you, if it made you think, if it helped you in any way, I ask that you please drop a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel to hear more stories like this, real stories from real women who have lived, suffered, fought, and come out on top. Comment down below what you thought, how you feel, and where you're watching from. Your comments mean the world. They help me know that these stories matter, that sharing them actually serves a purpose. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, please share this video with them. We never know who we might be helping with our experiences. I am sending a big, huge hug to all of you who took the time to listen. May God bless you, and remember, it is never, ever too late to live. It is never too late to claim your happiness, and it is never too late to be free. With so much love, Sarah Sally Jenkins.